2018, researchers from Harvard Business School ran an experiment that should have changed how every company thinks about office design. They equipped employees at 2 Fortune 500 companies with electronic sensors that tracked every face-to-face interaction, every conversation, every physical proximity to another person. Before and after, those companies removed their office walls and transitioned to open floor plans. The stated reason for the change was collaboration. That was what the executives told the press. That was what the managers told their teams. We're tearing down the walls to bring people together. Here's what actually happened. Face-to-face interaction fell by approximately 70%. Not slightly, not at the margins, 70%. And electronic communication, email and instant messaging went up by 56%. The office, designed to make people connect with each other more, produced a workforce that avoided face-to-face interaction and retreated behind screens instead. That result was not a surprise to everyone, because the collaboration story, the one about bringing people together, about spontaneous creative collisions, about tearing down walls to unleash human potential, was never the reason open offices were designed. It was the reason they were sold. The actual history of the open office doesn't start in Silicon Valley. It doesn't start with Google or Facebook. It starts in the early 1900s with factories. The first open workspaces were designed not for creative professionals, but for clerks, typists, and administrators, workers who performed repetitive, easily observable tasks in large undivided rooms filled with identical desks in rows. The logic of that design was not about creativity. It was not about spontaneous collaboration. It was about one thing: visibility. A supervisor standing at one end of the floor could observe every employee at every desk without moving, without effort, without technology. In the 1960s, designer Robert Probst introduced the cubicle as a deliberate response to the dehumanizing conditions of the factory-style office. Probst designed it to give workers privacy, space they could configure for their own needs, acoustic separation from their colleagues. What he created was quickly stripped of its original intent. By the 1980s, companies had repurposed the cubicle not as a privacy tool, but as a density tool, a way to pack more employees into less space at lower cost. And then, in the early 2000s, Silicon Valley did something remarkable. It took the open factory floor, the design that had been standard before anyone thought to give workers any privacy at all, and repackaged it as a revolutionary innovation. By 2014, approximately 70% of US offices had adopted some form of open floor plan. Average square footage per employee dropped by roughly a third in 7 years. One analysis estimated that JP Morgan may have avoided more than $1 billion in real estate costs over 7 years through open office adoption. The collaboration story was not the primary driver. Real estate economics were. And the function that started in 1910, the function of making workers visible, never went away. It just acquired better branding. To understand what the open office actually does to the people inside it, you need to go back 230 years before the Harvard study. In 1791, a British philosopher named Jeremy Bentham designed an architectural structure he called the Panopticon. It was conceived as a prison. The design was circular. Individual cells lined the outer ring, each one visible from a central observation tower positioned in the middle. The prisoners could see the tower. They could not see whether a guard was watching. And that uncertainty, that inability to know whether observation was happening at any given moment, was the entire mechanism of control. Bentham's insight was that you didn't need to actually watch people to control their behavior. You only needed them to believe they might be watched. He described it as a new mode of obtaining power of mind over mind. 200 years later, the French philosopher Michel Foucault used the Panopticon as the central metaphor of his analysis of modern power structures. Foucault's argument: when people know they might be watched, they become their own watchers. They police their own behavior in anticipation of a judgment that may or may not be occurring. The most efficient control system is the one that doesn't need to operate continuously, because the people inside it have already internalized the possibility of observation. Now stand in any open office, there is no central tower, but there is the constant ambient awareness that anyone in the room might be observing you at any moment. Your manager, a colleague, someone from another team who happens to be looking in your direction. You don't know when you're being watched. You don't know whose opinion of you is being formed by how you're sitting, what's on your screen, whether you look engaged or distracted, whether you got up from your desk at a time that might read as lack of commitment. That uncertainty is not a side effect of the open office, it is the mechanism. 3 specific mechanisms explain what that constant ambient surveillance actually does to the people inside it. The first mechanism is behavioral self-regulation. Employees in open settings modify their behavior not because they are being actively monitored, but because they might be. They appear occupied even when they're not. They suppress visible expressions of frustration or confusion. They stay at their desk past the point of productive work because leaving would require walking through a space where their departure would be observed and potentially noted. The cognitive load of that continuous self-monitoring is not zero. It consumes attention. It consumes energy. It consumes the mental resources that would otherwise go toward the work itself. You're not just doing your job in an open office, you're doing your job while simultaneously managing a continuous low-level performance for an indefinite audience. The second mechanism is what Harvard researchers called the collaboration paradox. Their finding was not simply that open offices fail to produce collaboration, it was that open offices actively reduce it. In an enclosed space, a cubicle, an office with a door, a conversation between 2 people is implicitly private. In an open office, every conversation is a performance. The person you're talking to can hear you. So can the 6 people around them. So can whoever happens to be walking past. The social cost of informal conversation rises sharply. People decide the conversation isn't worth the public exposure. They send an email instead, or they say nothing at all. The face-to-face interaction that drives trust, that resolves ambiguity, that generates ideas, declines because the architecture eliminated the conditions under which that interaction was comfortable. The third mechanism is the productivity cost. The cost that doesn't appear on any balance sheet. Research found that employees in open offices lose up to 86 minutes of productive work per day to noise and interruption. 86 minutes every workday. And yet, open offices persist. Companies that have access to this research continue building them because the cost of those 86 lost minutes does not appear anywhere on the company's financial statements. What does appear is the real estate cost, which dropped by 1/3, which saved companies like JP Morgan over $1 billion. The calculation is rational. It just wasn't made with your interest in mind. I am going to give you 3 moves you can use. These are practical and immediate. You probably can't redesign your building, but you can operate inside this architecture with clear eyes. The first move is reclaim the invisible spaces. In any open office, the small meeting rooms, the phone booths, the quiet zones, any enclosed space with a door are the most cognitively valuable spaces in the building. Most people use them only for calls or formal meetings. That's a waste of the most protected resource in your environment. Use enclosed spaces deliberately for any work that requires sustained focus, any conversation that requires genuine candor, and any thinking that would be disrupted by the ambient awareness of being observed. Defaulting to enclosed space when the work demands it is not antisocial. It's the rational response to an architecture that was not designed for the kind of work your role requires. The second move you can apply is to become conscious of what you put in writing. One of the direct effects of the open office is that substantive exchanges migrate to digital channels, where they become searchable, stored, and potentially reviewed. Not every conversation benefits from being a written record. The conversations that build genuine trust, that resolve interpersonal tension, that involve candid assessments of difficult situations, lose something significant when they move to text. The open office will push everything toward text. Understanding why that serves the company should inform how often you let it. The third move you can immediately use is to stop measuring yourself by appearance. The behavioral self-regulation the open office induces, appearing productive, staying at your desk, suppressing any behavior that might read as disengagement, is not free. Every minute you spend managing your appearance is a minute you're not spending on the actual work. Anchor your self-assessment to outcomes instead. What did you actually produce today? Not how long you were at your desk. Not how occupied you appeared. What was the output? That reframe doesn't fix the environment, but it separates your sense of your own productivity from the performance the environment is asking you to give. The open office was not designed to benefit you. It was designed to reduce real estate costs while maintaining the visibility conditions that make workforce management easier. The collaboration story was the most effective way to sell that design to the people who would have to live inside it. You've been working in a Panopticon. The only thing that's changed is now you know what to call it. The next video goes deeper into the system, specifically why your company needs you to feel slightly insecure about your job. Not too insecure, not too secure, just enough. Subscribe if you want to understand how that mechanism works.